Welcome, friends, family, and keepers of the true faith, to another blog, which is episode 22, dated 24th of July 2022. Well, I pressed the record button and I tried to clear my mind, and it's been a bit of a tricky week, and I am totally unprepared this week. It's one of those things where I'm tending to find that with all the best intentions in the world, I'm becoming sidetracked. So this week has been an unusual week, and I think anybody would understand that with the heat wave, as we call it, that was on Monday and Tuesday. It went into a bit of Wednesday as well. I was then asked to join Maymeister for a waffle, which was very enjoyable. Love doing those things. He's a great mate. He's a person that champions my show, wants me to do well, feels that this blog is doing wonders for me. Something that I have sometimes great difficulty in thinking whether it does or not, probably because of emotions, which I try to put to one side and see the good. So I hope I do a good job. I hope I find people find things entertaining. Again, I stress that this is really a sort of a diary, a warts for all. You should put down things that are bad as well as the good. I just wish there was a better balance, but I can't control that. So the waffle was great. And then, of course, Maymeister did a live stream on Saturday, which then puts me well behind with me doing absolutely anything. Because if you think about it, I'm forever looking for big box games to discuss, some stuff that I've bought this week. Little odds and sods that are kicking about, because I tell you what it is, I love seeing on other shows, other YouTube channels, a box that I used to have. It can bring back so many memories. A visual element, that's the thing I was looking for. So it's very difficult if you're sidetracked. So we'll start off anyway, as best as I can. The news, I'm trying to go fast as possible, and it really is just a date stamp. So this week, on the 24th of the 7th, it is today, so the week's just passed. The war. We all know it's still going on. Apparently there was a treaty that was going to be passed between Russia and Ukraine to get some of the most urgent food out to the world, as it's causing major problems, including to third world countries. And as you know, I mentioned last week about sunflower oil and all sorts of stuff. So apparently the treaty was signed for free ports, and then Russia goes and sends a cruise missile to a dock, and causes the whole thing to be in doubt, even though it's signed. They're being very tight-lipped, Russia, saying whether it was from them or not. Of course it was from them. And so we now live in fear again, and nothing changes in regards to food prices, etc. Not that it would make much of a difference. I think for months, you know how the governments work in regards to passing on bargains. So let's just get this war finished with, please. Monkeypox was in the news again. Now, I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. There was a health scare with monkeypox. Apparently now the risk is now considered to be very high, with over 2,500 cases in this country alone. Obviously worldwide that figure is much higher, which is why they've put the risk at a much higher rate. Let's hope that one doesn't turn into a pandemic of a sort. Energy, okay, that's always in the news. Apparently families may be asked to turn their thermostats down to avoid winter blackouts. The government is considering a winter TV campaign telling people how to stay warm during the winter months, but by keeping the thermostat down. This doesn't bode very well. We know that there is a government package that's going to be coming out shortly to help us with our bills, and now they're talking about blackouts and TV campaigns. Isn't that TV campaign going to be an awful lot of money? I don't know. You know me with the news and so forth. I rarely have an opinion. I just know that some things are just the wrong way to go. I don't see that as a right way to go. The leadership battle for the Conservative Party is now down to two. We're down to Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, I believe. Doesn't mean anything to me. Both of them have probably got their good points and their bad points. We're so far down a certain road that it would take years to make any inroads to anything better, and that includes changing governments to a Labour government. They're as bad as each other anyway. I'm not a political person, but we are now down a road that I don't think we can really U-turn out of. And that's pretty much it for the news. Now, when it comes to work, there isn't an awful lot that's going on. Obviously, it's all based now on my health. But my union rep said that he wanted to send a letter and explain to them some of my concerns, things that raise my stress levels, and they know full well that they mismatched me in my job, and I have to also understand that not always, even if there wasn't a mismatch, would I have become a manager. Now, I've expressed that, but my grievance was all about the manager's position. So I've got a meeting with him on Monday to express the sort of words that I want him to use when he has his meeting with the HR business partner. And basically, I just want to stress to them that although I recognise, a manager position is probably not there for me anymore, you can't kick somebody down 9 years in their career because of a mismatch. You've got to put that right. There's got to be some way to actually recognise those skill sets, whether it's I'm on courses that a person that would be kicked down to an analyst role wouldn't be able to go on because they're not high enough, or something. I'm looking for something that's a midway point, something that says, yes, we can't really call you an analyst. We need to call you something that recognises your skill set. Something where it doesn't break business law in regards to me stopping somebody also applying for my role. Nobody should apply for a role that I filled. That's the thing. If you change a job title, I don't see what the problem is with that. And I'm looking for something that says senior or supervisor or lead or something, because I don't want it known that a person can just come off the street, have an analyst role, and will be equal level to me when I've done 9 years of this work. It will always be a resentment thing. I know that I'll have to go back to work. I don't know when that will be because of my health. But when I do go back, I don't want them also to think that the person that they used to have is exactly the same person as I used to be. Because they will want to do things like, oh, let's have a team meeting where we all meet up and bond. And I'll be going, keep that to yourself. You don't consider me part of your team. If you consider me part of your team, you'll treat me better. I don't want to go down a route like that. I don't want to turn down training and go, what's the point of going on this training? I did all this training for the past 8 years and look where it got me. You just kicked me down. All of those things I could throw back in their face, but it will get me nowhere. And all I can say is that it would be crazy for me to lose a job that's there on the same wage that I've always been on without going to a job that's for me to go to, but like standard interviews and all that sort of stuff. So it looks very much I'll be going back. I'm hoping not so resentful, and we'll see how that goes. That's out of the way, all in 10 minutes, not bad. Let's get some shout outs done. Now remember, I always do shout outs. I'm never going to shy away from doing shout outs, no matter what really anybody says, because I want you to understand, guys, that, and gals, that you cheer me up, and I want to mention your name because you've meant something to me this week. I can't relay it any better than that, really. So shout outs to Down the Rabbit Hole, Wee Bob Art, Maymeister, Roberts Retro Gaming, Colin Jones, Jambon, Martroid, Steve's 8-Bit Gaming, Stevie Paperboy, Panther UK, 20th Century Gaming, Colin Ferguson, Highlander, and Milfy Swimbuckle. And like anything, they've all commented or left me questions. Just bear with me a moment. Very dry today. They've all left me comments or a question. Some of the questions I've answered because I don't have too much time, but there are things that I will raise in this blog. But what I normally do is just mention some things that I've watched this week. Robert and his gaming channel totally entertains me, and he's really rapidly approaching his 100th episode. Now he's promised a great 100th episode based on a number of what people have asked for that they'd like to see in the Atari range. I mentioned what my favourite, one of my favourite Atari games is. I think it was matched by Steve and a few others, and we think we know what it is, but not quite sure. So that's definitely one to look out for. I think he's only 5 episodes away from reaching the 100th episode. And that's a massive thing. When you consider that I'm at something like my 42nd video, when you consider some of the other parts I do, the extras, the gaming stuff, plus my blogs, he's at nearly 100. And that goes the same for Steve's 8-Bit Gaming, who continues to entertain me. He's a great bloke. He's somebody that always loves to share a comment with me. He never shies away from giving me advice or giving his opinion on something, whether it's good or bad. And sometimes, there is bad there, that I need to address and think differently of. I need to adapt and I need to evolve. So this blog might turn into something a bit different from next week. I don't know at the moment. It all depends on how much time and how technical I want to go with doing things. So just want to mention, big shout out to Steve. Please do go and support his channel. He even did a video today of a sort of a platformy nightish type game where he's going through a castle. Very entertaining. Didn't die enough though. As far as I'm concerned, he's got to die in every episode. And I counted only about 5 in that. It really needs to have at least 15, Steve. So please die more. No, I can't really say things like that, for goodness sake. You're doing great, mate. So obviously I've watched Maymeister's stuff, and of course I was doing a blog with him. Always fun to do that, and I've mentioned that before. Haven't watched too much else. I usually shout out ones that I can remember, and today has been a bit of a troublesome day for me to clear my mind and think of something new. So I do apologise that I can't think of too much more to say. But all of you guys that are doing your channel stuff, please keep it up. You You entertain me like nobody's business, really. And when you consider what crap there is on TV, awful. Okay, so I've got some questions that I've been asked, and some of them were a bit too complex for me to um, talk about in by writing it out. So Mainmeister, he left one at the sort of like last minutes of when I start preparing. He wanted to know what my best 5 8-bit computers are in order, and why. Now, 5. Yes, and I'd have rather it be a little bit more. So I'm going to mention them in order. So I think I wrote down 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I went back as far as the ZX81 really. So I counted the 8th one as the ZX81. And I'll explain all of this a little bit later on. The 7th as the MSX. The 6th as the VIC-20. The 5th as the BBC B. Then we've got 4th Amstrad, and that's will be the CPC, 464. Take your pick. 3rd Spectrum, 2nd Atari 800, 1st Commodore 64. Now, why those? Well, I didn't put in things like the PET and the Apple IIes because those were a little further back, and I don't consider them really personal computers from the point of view that I would have been able to have afforded them back then. We all know that those would have been over £1,000, and really we're talking what we pay for PCs now in that respect. I don't think we can really take away the importance of some of these computers, but not necessarily are they my favourites for a reason. So the ZX81 was something that I built. The MSX I thought was a great idea. It has a commonality in its chipset, and it did have sprites and sound and so forth, but it just wasn't something that I considered to be up in the top tier. The VIC-20 was one of the first computers I had with colour, and it came at a time where the Spectrum wasn't out yet. The Atari, though, had been out a number of years, but the VIC-20 was so cheap. I then had the power of sound and graphics to hand at a very cheap price. So I've put the VIC-20 there. The BBC, you can't miss its importance to schooling, and started that whole computer program in England. So you really do have to have the BBC in your titles, but it was so expensive. If you wanted to tell your parents, look, a computer that will help me do my schoolwork, and they asked you what do you have at school, and they said the BBC, they'd look at the price and go, you ain't having that. And then you started to look at all the other computers, and you were faced with a dilemma of having something that's not quite the same, and therefore you wrote in BASIC or whatever it is if you were doing computer studies, and you'd have to adapt that BASIC to what you're learning at school. If you didn't have lines like plot and so forth, you had great difficulty. So the BBC is there, and its importance is well known. The Amstrad is there because I think it offered something a little bit more than the Spectrum had to offer. But it was at a much later date, so really it had a much easier course than the Spectrum did, because the Spectrum was old by then. So obviously you had a few different graphic modes, sound chip that the Spectrum never had in its infancy. So, and of course it offered you it with a package which was interesting, that had a green screen monitor or a colour monitor sold with it, and a tape deck built in or a disk drive built in later on. So you had a number of options, and they weren't that expensive. Obviously a little bit more than others that are on the market. but they were good value. So the Spectrum then, we can't ignore the importance of the Spectrum. If we look at the global market, the world market, you then see its shortcomings because it wasn't successful in America. It was, I think, done by Timex over there. But its European influence is incredibly high. But the biggest influence, obviously, is in the UK itself. How can you ignore a 16 or 48K computer sub £100? Because even the 48K model came down from 100. I think it started. Was it Spectrum started off at 149, dropped to 99 in 2 years, something like that. The 16K model ended after a year, so most people don't even talk about that one too much. But what I'm trying to get at here is for all its shortcomings with its rubber keyboard, no sound, no specific hardware abilities for scrolling and sprites, it did magnificently well and started so many people's careers in programming. Can't ignore that. And I mentioned the Atari 800 because it was one of the... I wanted that computer so bad, and I could only afford it by fixing computers at a shop that my sister was working at. And when you consider that that computer came out 79, is it 78, 79, and the Atari 2600 was still a machine which was a console for 2 years, and you had that leap in graphics and sound because it used custom chips. It had so much love and attention put into that machine that it was still valid well into 1984-85, and that means that you had a machine that was 6 or 7 years old competing with the likes of the new boys on the market, the Spectrum, the Commodore 64. So I've got to consider that the Atari 800 is so powerful and so iconic that I've got to have that as my second computer. And obviously the first one is the Commodore 64, my first love of a computer, the machine I had for the greatest amount of time until my Amiga came along, offering hardware sprites, a fantastic sound chip, 64K of RAM. A lot of that was available to you, although quite not so much in BASIC. But if you wanted to use higher level programming, you had all the tools there. It was all there for you, but you just had to do research to get the best out of it. And so a lot of people took their time to do that. So I hope that gives you your answer. And then he asked a second question: what's the best advice I could give myself if I could go back in time? And that's a difficult one for me, Mainmeister, because I am starting to think of a few regrets, especially when I start thinking about my work. I probably would try and go back and say, relax. Try not to take things so seriously. Spend more time with your family. Work is not the end all and be all. It's a means for you to live. I think those are the advice I would give, because if there was ever any regret, it would be not spending time with my father before he died and spending too much time at work. I should never have pushed my head in the sand and hoped it would go away. And work was the easy option for me to avoid that. But hey, let's not get emotional again. It's just when I do think about those things, I do think I was a silly boy. Okay, Colin wanted me to know what retro gear I would never sell. And I think, I don't know if you consider an arcade cabinet a retro piece of gear, but most people know I've got a Nintendo 10 arcade machine that's broken in the garage that was supposed to be a pet project. And I've had it for over 20 odd years and I haven't done much with it. and I don't see me getting rid of it very very soon. So don't think I'll ever sell that. I've always, from the moment I saw an arcade machine cabinet, wanted to have one. And I think it's that same need that if you're into pinball tables, you've always then gone, I'll have one of them one day. I will have one in my man cave or girl cave if you're, if you're a lady, or the garage or whatever. You're thinking it's the most expensive, out the way thing that I could ever afford. So I'll put it on my bucket list of something to have. Never thinking that 30 years later they would become something that's possible. So I hope that answers your question. Steve's 8-Bit Gaming, as you know, great bloke, asked me what is my current bargain purchase of the year. Because he's recently bought a fantastic DVD set. It's the TV show UFO, which I think ran for 26 episodes in 1969, 1970. Fantastic show. Definitely one that I've got the DVDs of. I don't want to burst your bubble though, but Amazon was selling that box set £2 cheaper than what you bought it this week. But to be quite honest, anybody who buys something at the price that you mentioned, and we are talking £15-16, you bought a bargain, especially if it's your favourite show, Steve. So I've got those DVDs. I've been meaning to get the Blu-rays. The Blu-rays are too expensive for me. I will do that at some point. I've got the books on UFO. I've got the music from Barry Gray of UFO. I've got scripts and all sorts of things, memorabilia, that I need to sort out at some point, and I'm going to take great pleasure in showing you all this sort of stuff later on. But for now, the current bargain of the year, I don't think I've had one. We're now 7 months in. I've bought lots and lots of stuff. I don't think I've got to the point where I've gone, wow, I got that £50 cheaper than anybody else, or £70 cheaper, or £20 cheaper. Now, the good news is that Amazon and so forth have made mistakes and have sent me 2 copies of something, or cocked it up, and they told me that I don't need to send something back, which is a bargain, but it's not a bargain from the point of view that it's something for sale and I got it cheaper through negotiation. So I don't think I've had one, I'm sorry to say. But that's going to change, I'm pretty sure of it. I will buy something that I'll get that's cheaper than anybody else has ever been able to pick it up for it. And as soon as I do, I'll be answering your question. Thank you so much. Panther, as you know, big friend of the show. Shame about his big head. But, like I say, what can I say? He's a mega celebrity now. It won't be very long before the BBC or Sky ask for his services or ask his advice. In fact, he could be our next Prime Minister for all I know. His head is that big. But anyway, I love you, Panther, no problem. He's opened up Foodgate again. What can I say, guys? He wanted to know what my favourite food is to put on toast. Wow, I suppose beans on toast is everybody's favourite, isn't it? Other than just putting butter on in the morning on toast and eating it before I take my tablets, is a mainstay and something that I do. Or I do currently at the moment, because I'm taking so many tablets. Well, I'll take it like this. I take so many tablets I rattle when I walk. I do have a slice of toast in the morning. It does have butter on it. But if I wasn't having beans, I suppose cheese on toast is the next one. But I don't generally have that, because I don't know if anybody else does this, but we've got these sort of like toaster bags where you can make a toasted cheese sandwich. You put the 2 slices of bread in, you put the cheese in, you put it in the toaster if you've got one of those thick toasters, and because it's in a bag, it melts the cheese, and when you pull it out, you've got a nice melted cheese sandwich. Sort of like a cheaper way of than having one of those Breville toaster things, you know, or George Foreman's fat machines or whatever. So I don't see that as being on toast because that's in a sandwich. It's a toasted sandwich. But I'm going to say beans. Okay. And he wanted to know what he wanted me to mention what I think is the most robust systems. You know, ones that don't fail very often. And it can go back to 8-bit, 16-bit PCs or anything like that. And I have to turn around and say that I would probably say the arcade machines, because they were built, you know, to have the maximum amount of work done on them. So I would probably say that. And then I hope that answers your question there. And then we've got Milfy Swimbuckle. Now, he's posed a similar question to last time. And what that question last time is that I'm trapped in a cave with Mainmeister and Panther. And I'm sure he's trying to kill me, or mentally kill me anyway. But he's changed the rules a little bit here. And he's basically stated that I'm still trapped for a year. But I've got to choose 4 games for the Commodore 64 and 4 games for the Amiga that have 2-player mode only. So I don't think he stressed too much on whether it was alternate players, but I think he said 2-player mode games only. And most of the games that I needed to choose were ones where 2 players played at the same time. So for my Commodore 64, I've mentioned Whizball, because I believe you can play as the main character and the cat and play at the same time. Pit Stop 2 is always a great split-screen racing game. International Karate Plus, you have 3 players, but you can actually have 2 of those players playing on there. And then I know that Mainmeister loves his Hyper Sports, so I think I'll go with those for the Commodore 64. When it comes to the Amiga, I think I'll choose Sensible Soccer, because that's a good football game where you play together. Speedball 2, I know that these are mostly sports games, but I do think that we're quite competitive, Mainmeister and Panther and I. But I have chosen Archon 2 as a game that I'd like to play. Along with, I'm going to choose, what I wrote down here was a pool game, because I couldn't remember if Archer McLean did a pool game for the Amiga or not. I'm pretty sure he did. But a pool or a snooker game, an Archon 2, would balance out the top heaviness of the shoot-em-ups and sports games that I mentioned before. So I hope that's answered your question, Milfy. And so we're going to come to a little bit of a topic now, because Bob wanted to know what my 3 favourite adverts were, right? And I gave them to him in a written answer. Okay, and I believe my answers were the Unigate milk advert from the 70s, which had the Humphreys. Now I don't know if you remember what the Humphreys were, but the Humphreys were straws that nicked your milk. And the idea from Unigate was that they invented a character that kids would have to imagine, because all you saw of them was a straw. And they nicked your milk. And so Unigate wanted you to persuade your mum to buy 2 pints of milk, because the Humphreys would steal the other one. So that was always a favourite of mine, the Humphreys, and I forever was thinking what they could look like. And they brought in a host of actors, Muhammad Ali and Frank Muir and all sorts, of Rod Hull, where they'd sit them in front of the camera and they would just talk when they had a glass of milk, and this straw would just come in from the side, dip itself in, drink the milk, sort of like shake itself, go to the side, and when they went to go and have their drink, their milk had mysteriously gone. Great times. And the other ones that I meant, because I didn't really think too much, because some of these ones are just in my brain. And I remember the Bird's Eye Beef Burger adverts, which started off with 2 boys called Dan and Ben. and they were always talking about, you know, how their beef burgers were going to be presented, and you know, it was just a mad conversation. And later on, I think Ben had a girlfriend, so that Bird's Eye beef burgers come along. But they also had ones where there was some workers in a truck, and they would, and it was the song to Que Sera Sera. I don't know if you know that tune, Que Sera Sera, whatever will be will be, and they were singing about Bird's Eye food. You know, will it be onion? Will it be chips? We'll have to wait and see. Hope it's chips. It's chips. We hope it's chips. It's chips. Always made me smile whenever I watched that advert. And then the one that sticks out in the mind, and I don't know what it was. It might be because it would be the year that I got my Commodore 64, but the Woolworths Christmas 1982 campaign, which was the shopping spree song, had a host of stars. And basically it was just magical, you know, seeing all these big quality streets and adverts for hi-fi units and all sorts of stuff. And I think my sister, being 18 months older than me, was getting an Amstrad hi-fi system. So that sticks out an awful lot. But then again, so do a lot of others. Now I mentioned a fourth one here because I think everybody will probably remember it. Terry Scott, who was a great comedian who was in his own show, Terry and June, advertised Curly Whirlies. Curly Whirlies was a favourite chocolate bar of mine. I think you could still get them just about. But he used to dress up as a sort of like a Just William schoolboy, put on a daft voice and advertise for Curly Whirlies. And I could mention a whole host of stuff. And if we're going back that far, then really we have to start talking about TV shows that I used to watch as a kid. And as a child, I didn't have too many problems when I was at primary school, and most of my problems started when I was at secondary school. So I used to love being able to come home, and I'd watch shows like Bagpuss, The Clangers, a lot of them. And there's been a bit of a discussion this morning in Discord about it, and I thought I'd just quickly check up on a few things. And it is quite surprising how many episodes were made, because we think to ourselves that they must have made hundreds, but actually they only made a handful. So a big one of those that meets that criteria is Bagpuss, which only had 13 episodes, and Mr. Ben, which had 14 episodes. Some of the others had a slightly more there, but still quite low numbers. The Clangers was 26 episodes over 2 seasons. Ivor the Engine had 26 episodes in 1959 in black and white, and I can't remember seeing those shows. And there were 40 in 1975, which are the ones that I'm going to remember. Will-O-the-Wisp, a favourite of mine, between after Blue Peter and before the evening news that my mum would want to watch at 5:45. So Will-O-the-Wisp, 52 episodes over 2 seasons. Again, we're talking about a 5-minute cartoon. Noggin the Nog, I can just about remember. The ones I remember are not in colour, but apparently there were 21 in black and white and 6 in colour, and we are talking a 6-disc show repeated in the 70s. So I only just about remember Noggin the Nog. And then, of course, there's those favourite ones. Do you remember when we were in school, summer break was 7 weeks, you had the Children's Television Workshop work very hard during the mornings to entertain us with repeats of cartoons and stuff. There was something that the BBC did a co-production of. They did it twice, I think. The Flashing Blade and Robinson Crusoe. The Flashing Blade apparently was 12 episodes long, and Robinson Crusoe was 13 episodes long. And I really urge you to listen to the Robinson Crusoe soundtrack by Robert Mellin. I think I've shown that in an earlier show. And that really just ends that topic for here for now. But it's a phenomenal topic to talk about, because it fills so many happy memories for me. You know, such great times. A lot of my people that I speak to were very want to go outside, ride their bike, play on their space hoppers, and so forth. I did some of that stuff. I was a person that used to run up and down our garden in our first house, singing the Banana Split song, you know, or you know, and tra la la, you know, and all that sort of stuff. You know, I mean, and I remember the cartoon of that as well. What was it? The Arabian Nights had a donkey that you pulled its tail, and then a lot of these things are always music minded. I couldn't remember all of the words, but I pulled them up this morning. Does anybody remember the 70s Pink Panther show? And you only have to sort of like look at the words, right? And it just brings back the tune. So it says, think of all the animals you've ever heard about, like rhinoceroses and tigers, cats and mink. There are lots of funny animals in all this world, but have you ever seen a panther that is pink? Think. A panther that is positively pink. Well, here he is, the Pink Panther. The Pink Panther. Oh, but it just keeps going on and on. Hang on, just bear with me. The words just make me smile. He really is a groovy cat, and what a gentleman, a scholar, what an acrobat. He's in the Pink Panther, the rinky-dink panther, and it's as plain on your nose that he's the one and only truly original Panther Pink from head to toes. And I mean, it just brings back so many memories of that car. In fact, I think you could buy that pink car in a Dinky or Corgi line. Just absolutely fantastic thinking about those memories. So I'm going to end the topic there, and I'm sorry that that phone keeps bloody disappearing. So we were talking about Starsky and Hutch in Discord, just to show you, yes, I was a big Starsky and Hutch fan. There's the first season. Laylo Schifrin did the first season tune. Fantastic. What did I buy this week? Okay, so all steel books again. The Hurt Locker. Great film, actually. One that I don't watch over and over again, but I just love that cover, and I did like the film enough to buy it. It's a very glossy cover, that one. I bought The Secrets of Dumbledore because I never actually got round to seeing it, and the new film is being released on Steelbook this month. So I bought the first one so that the second one matches. This one, I couldn't remember if I bought it in 4K or not. I've bought Total Recall on DVD, tape. Yes, I had it on Laserdisc. Blu-ray. I've bought a 25th anniversary edition, a steelbook version, and I'm pretty sure I didn't have the 4K, so I bought the 4K and it's a steelbook. So that's good. And then of course the big release this week was Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Sam Raimi is the director. I quite liked it. I did go to the cinema to see it not too long ago, and definitely has some Evil Dead references in that particular film. And then we come to big box stuff. So I'll just show you a couple this week. So there's Planetscape Torment. We have to have a role-playing game, and this is one where the Baldur's Gate series was definitely something that I used to like playing. They weren't like Diablo and stuff. There's a little bit more thinking in them. And then of course we go to the ones that really sap all your time, things like Civilization. Now, I played Civilization from Civilization 2, I think. I never really played the first one because I thought I didn't really have the equipment to do it on. There was something about it, something that was didn't have the time, or couldn't find it at the right price, or didn't, you know, the manuals in these are incredibly large. As soon as I got into Civilization, I started buying them through the years, And they crop up on Steam all the time at a very cheap price. I think, what are we up to now? Civilization 6, 7, something like that. And then, how can we not go away without talking about Command and Conquer? And this is the first decade. Now, I did buy the big box versions of the first Command and Conquer and Red Alert, but they're in storage. So this smaller box is one that I went back to if I wanted to have a Command and Conquer reminisce. But you can now buy this remastered, and it's still absolutely fantastic for you to do so. And then we've got my biggest box to show, and you probably won't even get it by just the box. I forgot I had this. It's got a 2 in the corner and quite a well-known picture on the box. Don't know if that gives it away yet. Have a little think about that while I try and open this behemoth. Oh my god, it is pretty heavy. So I'm going to give the game away now, because I'm going to show you the book that comes with it. Oh. It's The Witcher 2. I have got The Witcher 3, I have got The Witcher 1. The Witcher 3 came with a statue. So this is why this one's a little bit smaller. So this is the art book, The Witcher. It's got lovely artwork in it. So all the scenes and the characters and so forth. Okay. So we'll get the book out of the way. It has a statue, the main character. It's quite nice. Nothing fantastic with that. I was a bit disappointed with that, to be quite honest. Here's the game in a bloody big box as well, because it had all the makings of and so forth. You get the old, what you used to get in Ultimate, coins that you would spend in the game, which is a nice little touch, you know, don't get me wrong, and it's metal, you know. There's a card game, which is the instructions for, and a pack of cards which are all beautifully crafted. And then, like you would get in all of the top range Dungeons and Dragons type role-playing games, you got your dice. All inscripted, all lovely, making that lovely chinky noise when they're all together. I think that's to play the mini game that's actually in it. And that brought back memories. When I found that, I was just hunting around in the garage and it just happened to come up. And as you can see, they beautifully present these things. But the one thing I will say about the box, even though it is a beautiful thing to have, and I don't even think to ask me how much it cost, because I can't remember. It's a bit plain. There's nothing going on all around it. And I think that's it, isn't it? We've reached the end. Thank you so much. I hope you didn't mind my mother sub-starring in the show today. Always a joy for my mum, but I did tell her, don't come on my room for an hour, I'm recording. But unfortunately, needs must for my mum. So with that bombshell, and until next week, the Stig won't be here. I wish you well for the next week, and I do hope you'll join me. I will be here next week, I am sure. Bye-bye.